The mop hit the marble floor with a wet slap, and 40 of the wealthiest people in the city went silent. "Pick it up," Marcus Thorne said, and he was smiling the way men smile when they've already decided the conversation is over. "Pick it up, old man, and then get out of my building before I have security do it for you." The janitor didn't move. He just stood there in his grey uniform, his hands loose at his sides, looking at the CEO of Hale Dynamics the way you'd look at a child who had just kicked over something he didn't understand. And in that one quiet second before anyone in that glittering boardroom knew what was coming, the most powerful man in the room had already lost everything. He just didn't know it yet. Let me back up. Because to understand how a billionaire destroyed himself over a 71-year-old man with a bucket, you have to understand the building first. Hale Dynamics sat on the river like a blade of glass, 60 floors of steel and ambition, and the people who worked there liked to say the lobby alone cost more than most houses. There was a waterfall that ran down a wall of black stone. There was a sculpture in the atrium that nobody could explain, and everybody pretended to love. And on the top floor, behind doors that required 3 separate keycards, Marcus Thorne ran the company like a man who had built it with his own 2 hands. He hadn't, of course. He'd been hired 8 years ago to modernize it. But Marcus had a gift, not for engineering, not for invention, but for making people believe the story he told about himself. And the story was always the same. I am the smartest man in any room, and the rest of you are lucky I let you breathe my air. The janitor's name was Arthur. Most of the staff just called him the old guy on nights. He came in at 9, after the offices emptied, and he moved through the building slow and steady, emptying bins, wiping down the long glass tables, running a soft cloth over the brass plaques on the wall near the elevators. He never complained. He never rushed. And he had a strange habit that the younger staff found a little eerie. He'd stop sometimes in front of the engineering bay, and he'd read the whiteboards. Just stand there, reading equations that the highest paid minds in the company had spent all day arguing over. One night, a junior engineer named Priya caught him doing it. "You understand all that?" she asked, half joking, expecting him to laugh and shuffle off. Arthur tilted his head at the board. "Your power draw on the 3rd stage is wrong," he said quietly. "You're going to overheat the core under load. Not in the lab. In the field, when it's hot and the fans are choked with dust. Somebody should check that before it ships." Then he picked up his bucket and went back to work, and Priya stood there for a long time, staring at the numbers. "Now here's the thing I want you to hold on to. Because everything that happens next, the humiliation, the firing, the way an entire empire turned on the man who thought he owned it, all of it grows from this one quiet warning that nobody important bothered to hear. The product was called Project Lighthouse. It was Marcus Thorne's baby, his legacy, the thing he was going to ride straight onto the cover of every business magazine in the country. A new energy core, smaller and cheaper than anything on the market, and Marcus had already promised the board and the investors and the press that it would ship in the spring. He'd staked his name on it. He'd staked the company's future on it. And 3 different engineers, quietly, on 3 different nights, had heard the old janitor say the same thing about the 3rd stage power draw. There was someone else in the building those nights too. A young woman named Nina Cole, who'd joined the company 4 months earlier as a junior data analyst, 25 years old, quiet, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. She wore plain clothes and carried her lunch in a paper bag, and never once mentioned that she'd graduated top of her class from a school most of the executives couldn't have gotten into. She kept to herself. She did her work. And she noticed everything. Nina noticed that Marcus Thorne treated the cleaning staff like furniture. She noticed the way he'd snap his fingers at the receptionist. She noticed how he'd take credit in meetings for ideas she'd watched other people propose. And one evening, staying late to finish a report. She noticed the old janitor stop at the engineering bay, read the board, and shake his head slowly, the way a doctor shakes his head at an X-ray. "You worked here a long time?" she asked him. Arthur smiled. It was a good smile, warm and a little tired. "Longer than most," he said. "You're new, Nina." "Arthur." He shook her hand, and his grip was firm, and there was something in his eyes, something steady and knowing that didn't match the uniform at all. "You like it here, Nina?" She thought about it. She was always careful with her answers. "I like the work," she said. "I'm not sure I like the company." Arthur nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something he'd suspected for a while. "No," he said, "neither do I. Not what it's become." She didn't understand what he meant then. She would. Everyone would. The morning it all came apart started like a celebration. Marcus had called a special meeting. Investors, board members, the press team, the whole gleaming circus. He was going to demo Project Lighthouse live. A working prototype, humming in a glass case at the front of the boardroom, while Marcus stood beside it in a suit that cost more than a car, and told the room they were looking at the future. The janitor was there because the morning crew was short-staffed, and someone had asked Arthur to stay past his shift to keep the floor clean for the guests. He was wiping down a side table near the back when the prototype began its demo cycle, and Arthur, old, grey, invisible Arthur, stopped wiping. He set down his cloth, and he watched the readout on the screen behind Marcus climb and climb and climb. "The core's running hot," Arthur said. He didn't shout it. He said it the way you'd point out that someone had left their headlights on. But the room was quiet, and his voice carried, and 40 heads turned to look at the old man in the grey uniform. Marcus laughed. It was a sharp, ugly laugh, the kind designed to make everyone else laugh with him. "I'm sorry," he said. "Did the cleaning crew just give us an engineering assessment?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "You need to shut it down," Arthur said, calm as still water. "The third stage drawer is going to spike. If that case wasn't reinforced, I'd ask everyone to step back." And now Marcus wasn't laughing anymore, because the old man wasn't backing down, and that more than anything was something Marcus Thorne could not tolerate. Not in front of the press. Not in front of the people whose money kept his name on the door. "Listen to me very carefully," Marcus said, crossing the room slowly. Each word landed like a slap. "You mop floors. You empty trash cans. You are the least important person who has ever stood in this room, and you are embarrassing yourself in front of people whose shoes are worth more than your life. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to pick up your little bucket, and you're going to walk out that door, and you are never coming back. You're fired. Effective right now." The room held its breath, and it was right then that the prototype behind him made a sound, a thin, rising whine, and the readout on the screen flashed red, and the glass case fogged with sudden heat. The demo unit shut itself down in a puff of acrid smoke, the safety cutoff slamming it dark in front of every investor and every camera in the room. Exactly the way the old man had said it would. Marcus spun around. For one beautiful, frozen second, the smartest man in the room had absolutely nothing to say. The future he'd promised was sitting in a glass box, dead and smoking, while a janitor he'd just fired stood at the back of the room with his arms folded. But Marcus Thorne hadn't clawed his way to the top by admitting he was wrong. "It's a minor fault," he announced, too loud, smile snapping back into place. "Pre-production units do this. Nothing to worry about." He turned back to Arthur, and the cruelty in his face had curdled into something colder. "Security. Get him out of my sight." 2 guards started forward. And that's when a voice cut across the room, quiet, even, but somehow louder than all of Marcus's noise. "Don't touch him." It was Nina, the junior analyst, the girl with the paper bag lunches, standing up from her seat at the back, and there was something different about the way she held herself now. Something that made the two guards slow and stop without quite knowing why. Marcus turned on her with relief, almost grateful for a new target. "And who, exactly, do you think you are?" Nina didn't answer him right away. She walked to the front of the room, unhurried, and she stopped beside the old janitor, and she did something that made the entire board sit forward in their chairs. She reached out and took Arthur's hand. "This is my grandfather," she said. "Arthur Hale." You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. "Hale," someone whispered. "The name on the building. The name on the brass plaques the old man wiped down every single night. The name on the letterhead, the stock certificates, the lobby, the river glass tower, all of it. My grandfather founded this company 43 years ago," Nina said, and her voice never rose, never shook, and that was somehow the most frightening thing of all. He built the first prototype in a garage with 2 friends and $900. He stepped back from the day-to-day 11 years ago, after my grandmother got sick. But he never sold his shares. She looked at Marcus. "He still owns 41% of this company, Mr. Thorne. He's the single largest shareholder you have. He has been the entire time you've worked here." The blood drained out of Marcus's face, one slow inch at a time. "He's been coming in at night," Nina went on, "for the past year, as part of the cleaning staff. He wanted to see what his company had become when nobody was watching, how the people at the bottom were treated, whether the work was still honest, whether the thing he spent his whole life building still had a soul. He didn't tell anyone. He asked me to keep his secret. So I did. I took a junior job under my mother's maiden name, and I watched, and I reported back to him every week." She turned to the board members lining the long table, the people who controlled the votes, the people who could end a CEO with a show of hands. "My grandfather doesn't make a habit of interfering," Nina said. "He's a patient man. But 3 of your own engineers warned this office that Project Lighthouse had a fatal flaw in the 3rd stage power draw. It's in the emails. It's in the logs. They were ignored, and worse, 2 of them were threatened with their jobs for raising it. She let that sit. My grandfather warned Mr. Thorne about that exact flaw 2 minutes ago in front of all of you, and you just watched it happen." A board member named Diane Okafor, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the longest-serving director in the room, set down her pen with a soft click. "Arthur," she said slowly, and there was wonder in her voice, and something like shame. "My God, it really is you." Arthur Hale smiled at her. "Hello, Diane," he said gently. "You've gone grey. It suits you." And the room came apart. "I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because it would be easy to tell you Marcus screamed, or begged, or threw a chair. He didn't. Men like Marcus don't fall apart loudly. They fall apart quietly, in real time, watching the room reorganize itself around the new center of gravity. And the new center of gravity was a 71-year-old man in a janitor's uniform. "Arthur," Marcus tried, and his voice cracked on the name. "Mr. Hale, sir. I had no idea. You have to understand. If I'd known, that's exactly the problem," Arthur said. He wasn't cruel about it. He was something worse than cruel. He was disappointed, the way a father is disappointed, and it landed harder than any insult could have. "You'd have treated me differently if you'd known who I was. You'd have treated those engineers differently if they'd had titles. You'd have listened to that warning if it had come from a man in a suit instead of a man with a mop." He shook his head. "I didn't build this company so the people in it would only matter as much as their paychecks. I built it so the best idea in the room would win, no matter who it came from. And somewhere along the way, you turned it into a place where the truth gets fired for embarrassing the boss." He walked, slowly, to the front of the room, and he looked at the dead, smoking prototype in its glass box. "It's a good design," he said quietly. "It really is. Your engineers are brilliant. The third stage fix is 2 days of work and a 4-cent component. If you'd let them speak, you'd have caught it months ago, and you'd be shipping in the spring like you promised. He turned back to the board. Instead, you almost shipped a product that overheats under load to 500,000 homes, and the only person who tried to stop it is the one he just fired. Diane Okafor stood. I'd like to call an emergency vote of the board, she said. You don't have to, Marcus said. His voice had gone flat and hollow. He'd done the math, every CEO does the math, and he knew that a board that smelled blood would vote however the largest shareholder wanted them to vote. And the largest shareholder was standing in front of him in steel-toed work boots. Mr. Thorne, Arthur said, I'm not going to humiliate you. You've done a fine job of that yourself, and I take no pleasure in watching a man drown. But you're going to step down as CEO. Today. The company will honor the contract you signed. You'll leave with what you're owed, not a cent more and not a cent less, because I believe in keeping promises even to people who break theirs. He paused. And before you go, you're going to walk down to the engineering bay, and you're going to apologize to Priya Anand and the 2 engineers you threatened, personally. Because they were right, and they were brave, and you tried to break them for it. That's the part I can't forgive, not the way you spoke to me, the way you spoke to them. It was the apology that finished him. Not the firing, not the lost title. The slow, public walk down to the engineering bay, where the people he'd belittled stood in a half-circle and watched the most powerful man in the company say the words he'd never said to anyone in his life. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Some of them couldn't even look at him. Priya Anand looked him dead in the eye the entire time, and she didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't, and she didn't have to lie to make him feel better. She just nodded once, accepting it for what it was, and that was the last mercy Marcus Thorne got out of that building. He left through the same lobby he'd marched through every morning for 8 years, past the waterfall, past the sculpture nobody could explain, past the brass plaques on the wall by the elevators. And maybe, for the first time, he actually read one. The biggest plaque. The one the old janitor had polished 1,000 times. Founded by Arthur Hale, it said, on the principle that a good idea answers to no one's rank. He'd walked past it every single day for 8 years and never once looked. There's a part of this story the cameras didn't catch, and it's my favorite part, so let me give it to you. That night, after the investors had gone and the press had filed their stories and the board had named Diane Okafor interim CEO, Arthur Hale put on his grey uniform one last time. Nina found him in the engineering bay at 9 o'clock, right on schedule, wiping down the long glass table the way he had every night for a year. Grandpa, she said, laughing. You own 41% of the building. You don't have to clean it. I know, he said. He kept wiping. But I started here with a bucket and a good idea and nothing else. And I think a man should never forget what the bottom feels like. The day you're too important to clean up your own messes is the day you stop deserving the top. He set down the cloth and looked at her, and his eyes were wet and proud and clear. You did good, Nina. You watched, and you waited, and when it mattered, you stood up. That's all I ever wanted to know, that there was still someone in this building who'd stand up. The new energy core shipped that spring, on time, with the 4-cent fix Priya Anand's team had been trying to add for months. It worked beautifully. It went into 500,000 homes, and not a single one of them ever overheated. Priya was promoted to lead engineer. The 2 engineers Marcus had threatened got raises, public apologies, and their names on the patent. And every one of them learned the same lesson the hard way and the right way at once. It costs you nothing to listen to the person holding the mop, and it can cost you everything not to. As for Marcus Thorne, he landed somewhere else, eventually, the way men like him always do. But the story followed him. The video of the demo went everywhere. The smoking glass box, the old man's calm voice, the granddaughter taking his hand. People don't forget a thing like that. He spent the rest of his career being the man who fired the founder of his own company because he couldn't stand to be corrected by someone he thought was beneath him. And here's what I keep coming back to. Arthur Hale could have walked into that building on day one, flashed his name, and ruled it like a king. Nobody would have dared treat him the way Marcus did. But he didn't want to be feared. He wanted to know the truth. So he picked up a bucket, and he made himself invisible. And the people who passed him in the halls every night told him everything about who they really were by how they treated a man they thought could do nothing for them. That's the test, isn't it? Not how you treat the people who can lift you up, how you treat the people you think can't. So, let me ask you something before you go. Have you ever watched someone get underestimated, written off, talked down to, dismissed, and then watched the truth come out? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And here's the second question, the harder one. Be honest. When was the last time you really, truly listened to the person everyone else in the room ignored? If this story moved you, if you felt that knot in your chest when the old man set down his cloth and spoke up, do me a small favor. Hit that like button so more people find this channel. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that dignity isn't something money can buy. And if you're not subscribed yet, come join us, tap subscribe and ring that bell, because around here we believe the best stories are the ones that make you treat the next stranger a little kinder. This is the story you can't forget. I'll see you in the next one.